Hello everybody! Before we begin, I would like to let you all know that I have a book out. It is called Not Quite Dead, and it is the story of a woman whose fiancé passed away a year ago, having dreams where he tells her that he's still alive and trying to use said dreams to get him back. It is available on Amazon in both paperback and ebook formats, so if you've ever wanted to support me financially, then this is your opportunity to do so. Link is in the description. Hey gang, it's Squill, and it's time for my top 10 Steven Universe Season 5 episodes. Gotta say, this was probably the hardest Steven Universe list I've had to make so far. A lot of these episodes are very close together for me. So without further ado, let's see which episodes this season made the top 10. At number 10, we have What's Your Problem? What's Your Problem is a very strong character-focused episode. After two big info dump episodes in a row, it's nice to get a small Amethyst-centered episode, exploring how she feels about Rose being Pink Diamond. There are some very fun Amethyst shenanigans near the top of this one. They do a good job tricking you into thinking that Amethyst doesn't really care about what's actually going on, before hitting you hard with this moment here, where it's revealed that Amethyst has not only been trying to protect Steven, but also herself. I really love Steven and Amethyst's dialogue in this episode, just in general. You really get the feeling that the two care about each other in this episode. They're like siblings in a way, constantly lifting each other up. I really love Steven's line about Amethyst being the most mature crystal gem. Just a great reminder of how much she's developed over the last few seasons. What's Your Problem may not have any crazy lore reveals or hype moments, but it's a good Steven and Amethyst episode, and one that very nicely complements the arc it's a part of. At number 9, we have Stuck Together. Stuck Together is an incredibly solid start to the Wanted arc. This one is basically a bottle episode, taking place entirely on Aquamarine's ship. But there is some excellent character work in this one. Of course, the Steven and Lars dynamic is just as fun as it always is. This episode really highlights just how contrasting their personalities are. I love the whole bit where Steven makes Lars take his pants off, very funny. But of course, this episode shows Lars at easily his most vulnerable so far, finally opening up to Steven about his fears and insecurities. And I love Steven's line about being glad that Lars is with him, even if he's in a bad situation. It's a very real feeling. There is something comforting about not being alone in a stressful situation. And I love that in response to all of this, Lars tries to cheer Steven up for once. It's a great first step in the rest of his arc, and an excellent showcase of how far his friendship with Steven has come. Stuck Together is an excellent season premiere and a great start to one of Steven Universe's best arcs. At number 8, we have Change Your Mind. Okay, so I'm sure some of you would have expected this episode to be higher, given that it's the big finale, and others were expecting it to not even be on the list at all. Here's the thing, there's a lot that feels very rushed about Change Your Mind. Steven fusing with Pearl and Garnet, the Diamond's character arcs, and the uncorrupting of the gems are all things that should have taken place over a longer period of time. It's not entirely the show's fault, they had a lot to cover and not a lot of time, but it still makes for a finale that's not as good as it could have been. That being said, there's a lot I really love about this finale, particularly in its second half. While I feel as though Steven fusing with Pearl and Garnet should have happened prior to this, seeing all 4 of the crystal gems fuse makes for an excellent finale moment. Obsidian has an awesome design, and I love seeing them scale up White Diamond's ship. Despite her arc needing some more time in the oven, I think White Diamond makes for a pretty fantastic antagonist here. They do an amazing job playing up the creepiness of her taking over the bodies of the crystal gems, violating them and turning them into puppets. It works really well with the anti-fascist themes of the show, turning the gems into these literally colorless husks, void of personality. Steven getting his gem ripped out is one of the best moments in all of Steven Universe. It's another very unsettling scene, but it leads to something so beautiful and that really only this show could pull off. Absolutely love that split POV shot between the two Stevens. It is fantastic payoff to the Steven perspective rule. I love finally getting an answer as to what would happen if Steven lost his gem, and it still just being Steven is the perfect way to wrap up his identity crisis arc. And of course, James Baxter's animation on the two Stevens fusing is absolutely wonderful. I love Steven's little song at the end too. It's very sweet and encapsulates the themes of the show perfectly. Change Your Mind is not a perfect finale by any means, but what it does well, it does incredibly well. At number 7, we have Pool Hopping. Pool Hopping is our first real Garnet-centric episode since Season 2, and as such, it does not disappoint. The basic premise of this episode is just so much fun, seeing Garnet and Steven go out of their way to make the most random decisions possible. It's cool seeing the show play with Garnet's future vision a bit. What timelines are out there that Garnet just can't predict? But like a lot of great Steven Universe episodes, this fun premise ties in perfectly to the emotional core of the story. That being Garnet's uncertainty about the future and her insecurities that come with that. It's a great moment of vulnerability for Garnet, having the strong muscle of the group show a bit of her fears and anxiety. Reminds me a bit of that Jacob moment from Cloudy y'all know I love so much. And I love the way they tied us back to Garnet's relationship with Steven too. That Garnet hasn't been factoring in Steven's emotional growth and maturity over the years, still viewing him as just a child. It's always nice to see the gems acknowledge just how much Steven has developed. Pool Hopping is a fantastic episode and one of Garnet's best showings overall. At number 6, we have Can't Go Back. While I've been rather critical of Lapis's overall arc this season, I can't deny that Can't Go Back is one of her best episodes. Despite the show more often than not pushing her aside, I've always found Lapis's victim complex to be very fascinating. This constant push and pull within her over whether or not she deserves to be happy. There's an exchange in this episode I think about all the time, where Lapis asks Steven what if something bad happens, to which he counters with what if something good happens. There's a moment that better encapsulates Lapis as a character. I have yet to see it. Along with just sounding really nice, Lapis's son in this episode also represents the push and pull within her very well. You can tell she wants so bad to just be at peace with the rest of the gems, but it's just so hard to escape the anxieties that she's riddled with. And she ultimately doesn't by the end of the episode. This episode is really pretty on the visual level too. The constantly changing landscapes add a ton of good variety to the scenery here. And of course, Steven's dream here gives us one last hint in regards to Pink Diamond before the reveal in the following episode, showing that Pearl may have been involved in her murder. This moment is played very well, feels super eerie. It's episodes like Can't Go Back that make me really wish the show handled Lapis a little bit differently. She's a great character who had the potential to be even better. At number 5, we have Off Colors. Off Colors is an episode with a lot going for it. While the previous episode was our first to take place on Homeworld, this is our first time really getting to explore it. They really nail the oppressive atmosphere of this place. That Steven and Lars are never really safe for long. Great use of dark colors and shading in a lot of these shots. It is also in this episode that we are introduced to the titular Off Colors. They're fun characters, and I hope to see them fleshed out more in the Lars of the Stars spin-off. It's cool to see the show tackle ableism, the way society discards those it deems quote-unquote unuseful. But like was stuck together, the real star of the show here is Lars and his dynamic with Steven. I love seeing Steven encourage Lars, and Lars actually taking his advice instead of dismissing him. I love that his arc here isn't about being brave, but rather standing up for those who need it in spite of his fears. They're able to make Lars into a badass without really making him out of character. It's awesome to see this more fully realized version of Lars begin to take shape. But of course, the highlight of this episode is easily Lars's death and revival. Everything from the music to the beautiful pink shading in the scene is absolutely perfect. I usually hate these sort of fake out death scenes, as they almost always feel cheap to me. But this is a good example of a show actually earning a moment like this. Off Colors is another fantastic step forward in Lars's character development. At number 4, we have The Trial. Man, The Trial is such a fun episode. I just love the idea of Steven being put on trial for what Rose did. There's just a really intense back and forth to this episode. How guilty is Steven for the actions of his mother? The episode really puts Steven in a corner, forcing him to confront the uncomfortable realities of who Rose Quartz was, while still not having anywhere close to the full picture. The use of lighting in this episode is also fantastic. You really feel the pressure of the situation. These big, bright lights against a harsh black background. The Zircon defense attorney is a really fun character too. Amy Sedaris does a great job in this role as a stressed-out lawyer in over her head. I love when she gets so carried away that she flat-out accuses the Diamonds of shattering Pink. Really funny moment. Speaking of the Diamonds, I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not, but this episode might be my favorite use of yellow and blue across the entire series. You really feel just how emotional they are over the loss of Pink. And the way that they're positioned as towering over Steven really adds to the pressure here. Blue especially gets some really good stuff in this episode. I love the scene where she starts questioning Steven on how he shattered Pink Diamond. It's a tense moment that really helps humanize the Diamonds. The Trial is a fantastic episode and a great way to kick off the Pink Diamond murder mystery arc. At number 3, we have Jungle Moon. There is not a single episode of Steven Universe quite like Jungle Moon, and this is in part due to this being the only episode not to feature Steven himself. It doesn't break the Steven perspective rule, as Steven obviously makes up half of Stevonnie, but having a full Stevonnie episode gives this one a more young adult feel. And they help make this alien planet feel all the more isolating, in a way that I don't think would work if it were just Steven and Connie here. It also makes sense that they'd stay fused the entire time, so that they only need to focus on one person surviving instead of two. This alien planet that Stevonnie is stranded on is also just so visually striking. Tons of fun alien designs on display here. I really enjoy the survival angle that the first half of this episode takes. Again, it's just so different from any other episode of the show. But where things really get interesting is in the dream sequence in the second half of this episode. I really enjoy the use of metaphor here, comparing Connie's relationship with her mom to Pink's relationship with the rest of the Diamonds, particularly Yellow. This sequence gives us our first real sense of who Pink Diamond was, at least before it's retroactively revealed that we've seen her plenty of times before this point. In just a few short minutes, we get a sense of her childlike sense of wonder, as well as the pent-up rage that lies within her. When paired with what we learn about Pink Diamond later on, it makes for one of the most compelling scenes in the entire season. Jungle Moon is certainly a standout episode of Steven Universe, and one that I find myself thinking about quite often. At number 2, we have Reunited. Reunited is the big one. One of the most iconic episodes in all of Steven Universe. This episode made history by showcasing the first ever gay marriage in a TV show aimed at children. I talked about it already in the season retrospective, but it can't be emphasized enough just how important a scene like this was at the time. But what I really want to talk about here is this scene's placement in the episode itself. I really like the sort of calm before the storm we get here. This whimsical little musical number, this nice wedding, followed by the destructive force of the Diamonds. It just makes for such great contrast, seeing our characters at their absolute happiest before things turn to shit. I really love the Steven and Garnet moment, just so incredibly wholesome. And thankfully, the second half of this episode is pretty fantastic as well. It's so cool seeing all the gems work together as a team here. We get a lot of awesome character moments. I like Lapis coming back and confronting the Diamonds. I like Connie taking action when the other gems are paralyzed. I like Garnet reprimanding Blue for ruining her wedding. I love the cluster coming back in its freaky hand form, and I love Steven's new ability here to communicate with people when he's unconscious. I'm a big fan of the line he has to Pearl here about doing it for herself. Great callback to Sworn to the Sword. And this new ability is a very effective way to have Steven communicate to the Diamonds that Pink wasn't shattered. Reunited is a big, crazy episode of Steven Universe, and one that deserves all the love it receives. And at number 1, we have A Single Pale Rose. Look, you all can feel any way you want about the twist in A Single Pale Rose. I did my fair share of defending it in the season retrospective, so I don't really feel the need to repeat any of that here. It is almost undeniable, however, that the way in which this twist was revealed is absolutely perfect. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This episode has such a fun premise. This Pearl Inception episode. There's some great use of non-linear storytelling here, with us getting closer to the reveal with every layer Steven goes through. I really like this first Pearl in charge of compartmentalizing. There's some fun callbacks here. It's also cool getting to see Pearl's reaction to finding out that Rose is pregnant. I really love this scene here, the aftermath of the Diamonds wiping out most of the gems. The piano music, the eerie red lighting, and the gems scattered across the ground make for such a haunting moment. For such a short scene, it gives us a really great glimpse at the sort of trauma that Pearl deals with. But of course, the highlight of this episode is easily its last few minutes. It is such an interesting choice to portray an act like this as almost romantic. It embraces Rose's sense of escapism, abandoning her old life to carve out a new and better one. It's a decision that makes her happy, but is also undeniably selfish, as Steven and Pearl will still be dealing with the consequences of it thousands of years later. It's a very morally complex decision that was handled with the care that it deserved. A Single Pale Rose is just a perfect 11 minutes of Steven Universe, and one that feels longer than its runtime in the best way possible. I'm also just now realizing that every top 10 list I've done so far has had a Pearl episode in the top 2. She is my favorite character, so I guess it makes sense. And that was the Season 5 list. But before we go, here are some honorable mentions. It was tough choosing which episode in the Wanted arc to leave off the list. I went with Lars's Head because there's not really a ton going on in this one, but still a very strong finale to the Wanted arc. Sadie Killer is a nice slice of life Sadie episode, with a fun new trajectory for her character. Lars of the Stars is a great reintroduction to Lars and the Off-Colors, but I think the actual conflict of the episode is maybe a little underdeveloped. And Now We're Only Falling Apart is a great flashback episode to help explain Rose's motivations. This one would probably be number 11. And with that, we are now done with the original series. So stay tuned to see me cover the movie in future sometime after Fiona and Cake Season 2. Please let me know what your favorite episodes of Season 5 are in the comments, and have a good one. Squill out.